The waning afternoon light seeped through the curtains in my living room, creating elongated shadows that danced across the polished hardwood floor. Life in my tranquil suburban abode had fallen into a familiar cadence since I tied the knot with David 5 years back. At 52, I discovered an unexpected sense of tranquility, merging families and managing the intricacies of stepping into the role of a mother figure to Jake, David's 20-year-old son from his previous marriage. Jake was a wonderful child, consistently inviting friends over, their joyous laughter enveloping the home in a warmth I had grown to treasure. However, recently one of those friends began to distinguish themselves. Ethan, 21, with his bashful grin and fidgeting fingers, appeared to stay a bit longer than the rest, his gaze meeting mine in a manner that felt unique. I reassured myself it was merely a young man on a journey of self-discovery, yet beneath the surface I sensed a stirring, something I wasn't prepared to identify. It began in a seemingly harmless way. Jake and his friends would lounge on the couch, immersed in video games or discussing the latest college gossip, while I embraced the role of the laid-back stepmom, providing snacks and throwing in a quip or two. Ethan lingered in the background, his presence subtle, with dark hair cascading into his eyes as he softly murmured his replies. I observed the way he would diminish in size when the others poked fun at him, his self-assurance disintegrating beneath their light-hearted taunts. After the group departed, he lingered, volunteering to assist with the cleanup. "There's no need for that," I remarked, arranging the plates in the kitchen. Yet he persisted, his fingers grazing against mine as he offered me a glass, his touch lingering for a heartbeat longer than necessary. My breath caught in my throat as I met his gaze, those hazel eyes gentle yet piercing, as if he were truly seeing me for the very first time. The memory lingered, echoing in my thoughts as I navigated through my daily life. Ethan began visiting more frequently, occasionally without Jake, each time armed with a reason, requesting a book, seeking guidance on school matters. I ought to have established boundaries, yet there was an undeniable quality about him, a certain vulnerability and rawness, that captivated me. I reassured myself that my intentions were pure, offering support to a young man in need of encouragement. As the sun dipped below the horizon, he appeared, his posture slumped, as if burdened by an immense load. "May we have a conversation?" he inquired, his tone scarcely rising above a murmur. I nodded, guiding him to the back porch, where the air was heavy with the fragrance of jasmine and the rhythmic chorus of crickets filled the night. We perched on the wicker chairs, the distance between us seeming more confined than it ought to be. He shared his challenges, how he felt unseen, how he became paralyzed in social situations, how he was uncertain about becoming the man he aspired to be. His words stumbled, his hands fidgeting in his lap, and I was overwhelmed by the desire to mend it, to help him perceive himself as I did. "You possess more strength than you realize," I remarked, drawing nearer, my tone gentle yet resolute. "You simply have to have faith in it." His gaze locked onto mine, and once more that spark ignited, that silent attraction lingered in the air. I extended my hand, placing it gently on his arm, intending to offer solace, yet the atmosphere changed. His skin felt inviting beneath my touch, and we remained still, the moment expanding into something perilous. I hesitated, my heart pounding, yet Ethan maintained his gaze. "You make me feel like I could be someone," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper, as if sharing a secret. My chest constricted. This was a mistake, Jake, the life I had constructed, but the way he gazed at me, as if I were the solution to every query he'd ever pondered, stirred something within me that I believed was long forgotten. I lingered, murmuring something about fetching water, craving space, yet he trailed behind me into the kitchen. The house lay in stillness, David occupied with a late meeting, while Jake was out enjoying time with friends. It was merely the two of us, and the quiet hung in the air, challenging us to break it. In the soft glow of the kitchen, Ethan moved nearer, his uncertainty fading away. "I've never encountered anyone quite like you," he remarked, his voice quaking with a blend of apprehension and a daring edge. I ought to have intervened, sent him away, yet my body had different plans. My hands settled on his shoulders, grounding myself as much as him, and then he was kissing me, gentle at first, then fervent as if he'd been restraining it for ages. My thoughts urged me to retreat, yet my lips found his, my fingers weaving through his hair, the flavor of him sparking a flame I hadn't experienced in ages. It was daring, taboo, and it engulfed my very being. We separated, breathless, the weight of our actions hitting me like a powerful surge. Ethan's eyes were wide, his chest rising and falling rapidly, and for a brief moment we simply gazed at one another, ensnared in the aftermath. "No one can know," he murmured, his tone desperate, his fingers tightening around my wrist. I nodded, my throat constricted, guilt already gnawing at me. What have I done? He was a friend of my stepson, just on the cusp of adulthood, and I found myself wondering, what exactly was I? A woman who had lost her sanity? I urged him to leave, my voice trembling, and he quietly exited through the back door, leaving me in solitude with the lingering sensation of his touch and a secret that weighed heavily, like a ticking bomb. That night, I lay awake, the ceiling gazing down as I relived each moment, the heat of his skin, the intensity of his kiss, the boundary I had crossed. David lay next to me unaware while the burden of my treachery bore down, stifling. As I contemplated Jake, a wave of unease washed over me, twisting my stomach in knots. Yet, as guilt enveloped me, I couldn't escape the haunting image of Ethan's gaze, the way he had made me feel acknowledged, wanted, vibrant. I found myself ensnared, caught in a struggle between embarrassment and an insatiable desire that eluded my comprehension. As the first light of day crept in, I found myself at the window, observing the street, contemplating how I would confront him once more, or if I truly desired to intervene at all. The morning following that kiss, my home seemed like a place I didn't recognize. Each creak of the floorboards, each glimmer of sunlight filtering through the blinds, felt like a taunt, echoing memories of Ethan's lips, his hands, and the reckless plunge I had taken that left me scorched. I lingered at the kitchen counter, clutching my coffee mug, gazing out at the backyard where he had vanished into the darkness. With David already off to work and Jake still lost in slumber upstairs, the stillness enveloped the house like a heavy blanket. I repeatedly reassured myself that it was an error, a fleeting lapse in judgment, yet my body resonated with the recollection of him, his caress, his words, the way he gazed at me as if I were the sole focus of his world. Guilt gnawed at my insides, yet there was another force, something perilous and vibrant, and I despised the intensity of my longing for it. I made an effort to steer clear of Ethan, immersing myself in various errands and steering clear of the living room where Jake and his friends typically gathered. Yet this was a modest dwelling, and Ethan was not the sort to vanish. A few days later, I was folding laundry in the den when I heard the front door open, accompanied by Jake's voice in that familiar, softer tone Ethan's. My heart raced. I ought to have remained where I was, yet my feet led me to the hallway, where I found him, propped against the wall, his dark hair cascading into his eyes. He lifted his gaze and our eyes met, an unspoken energy flowing between us. Jake was lost in his own world, chattering away about a party, yet Ethan's gaze locked onto mine, brimming with inquiries and an intensity that quickened my heartbeat. I muttered an excuse and slipped into the kitchen, but Ethan trailed behind, hovering in the doorway as Jake sifted through the fridge. "Is there anything I can assist you with?" he inquired, his tone soft, seemingly pure enough to deceive anyone else. I shook my head, my hands trembling as I rearranged the dishes, but he moved in closer, close enough for me to catch the scent of his cologne, clean, subtly cedar, and utterly intoxicating. "I can't stop thinking about you," he whispered, his voice barely a breath, yet the words ignited a fire within me, crackling like a spark on parched earth. I shot a quick look at Jake, mere feet away, and whispered, "Not here." Yet my voice faltered, filled with longing, and Ethan's lips curled into a subtle, understanding smile. He held back, not at that moment, yet the atmosphere was heavy with the unspoken words between us. Later that evening, after Jake departed for a movie, Ethan sent me a text from a number I hadn't saved but recognized as his. "May we have a conversation?" Back porch, 9 p.m. My stomach churned. This was madness, a boundary I had already breached once before. I ought to have brushed it off, erased the message, and instructed him to keep his distance. As the minutes crept toward 9, I felt the familiar sensation of slipping into a cardigan, stepping out into the crisp night air, my heart racing as if I were embarking on a clandestine adventure after years of restraint. He lingered on the porch, his outline distinct in the moonlight, hands buried deep in his pockets. "I'm sorry," he began, his voice gravelly, "but I can't seem to behave normally around you anymore." I felt the urge to ask him to go, to put an end to this before it unraveled everything, but the words eluded me. Instead, I moved in closer, captivated by the fragility reflected in his gaze, the same unfiltered longing I had encountered previously. We conversed about his anxieties, his aspirations, how he sensed he was suffocating within himself. I convinced myself that I was aiding him, nurturing his self-assurance, yet the reality lay in the way my hand intertwined with his, the way his grip firmed around mine, the way the distance between us dissolved. It unfolded swiftly, akin to a dam bursting open. In an instant, our conversation faded, and suddenly his lips found mine, filled with urgency and longing, his hand slipping beneath my cardigan, radiating warmth against my skin. I returned his kiss, my fingers gripping his shoulders, the universe shrinking to the warmth of his form, the excitement of his caress. The porch lay shrouded in darkness, cloaked by the twisting jasmine vines, yet the danger lingered. David might return, Jake could stroll in, anyone could catch a glimpse. And yet that peril only heightened the allure, as if we were capturing fleeting moments that were never ours to claim. His breath came in uneven gasps, his voice barely a murmur against my neck. "You make me feel like I'm enough," he said, and my heart throbbed, caught in the tension between longing and the heaviness of our actions. But then beams of light glided over the driveway. We halted, separating, my heart pounding fiercely within my chest. The vehicle belonging to David. I pushed Ethan toward the side gate, my voice a desperate hush. "Go now." He paused, his gaze frantic, yet he melted into the shadows just as the front door swung open. David called out, his voice weary yet inviting, and I managed a smile, my lips still buzzing from Ethan's kiss. I whispered something about the need for fresh air, my hands trembling as I trailed behind David, hoping he wouldn't notice the rapid beat of my heart. That night, I found myself lying next to him, unable to sleep, as guilt and adrenaline battled within me. I had narrowly escaped calamity, and that near miss heightened the tension even further. The following day, Ethan returned, more audacious this time, his looks lingering despite Jake's presence. I noticed him observing me while I prepared the drinks, his eyes following the line of my neck, and it required all my strength to avoid his stare. Just then, Jake's phone rang, prompting him to step outside and leaving us alone in the living room. Ethan surged forward, his hand grazing my waist as he leaned closer, his voice a deep rumble. "I must see you once more. Tonight." My breath hitched, a mix of fear and desire coiling within me. I shook my head, yet my body leaned toward him, a traitor to my thoughts. "This is insane," I murmured, but he merely smiled, his fingers brushing against my wrist, sending delightful shivers down my spine. Before I could elaborate further, Jake returned, and Ethan withdrew effortlessly, as if the moment had never occurred. Yet, an invisible boundary had been established, and I found myself positioned on the unfavorable side. That night, as I gazed at my phone, his message illuminated the darkness. "Meet me. The witching hour. Your garage." My heart quickened. This had transformed beyond a mere kiss, it was an inferno, racing beyond my grasp. As I lay there, David's rhythmic breathing next to me, one question ignited in my thoughts. How long could we guard this secret before it engulfed us entirely? The moment Ethan's message illuminated my screen, it was as if I were perched on the brink of a precipice, the fierce wind swirling around me, challenging me to take the leap. "Let's connect. The witching hour. Your garage." Those words seared into my mind, each syllable a jolt of anxiety and desire that held me captive, wide awake, gazing at the ceiling while David lay next to me, his breath calm and unaware. My mind urged me to dismiss it, to put an end to this chaos before it shattered my existence, yet my body throbbed with the recollection of Ethan's caress, his words, the way he made me feel like I was more than just a stepmother, a spouse, a woman slipping into monotony. I found myself overwhelmed by guilt, yet his allure was undeniable and I loathed myself for succumbing to it. I quietly emerged from my slumber at 11:55, my heart racing as I donned a sweater and stealthily made my way downstairs. The house was still, a silence that magnifies each thought, each regret. The garage felt frigid, the atmosphere heavy with the aroma of oil and paint, and Ethan was present, propped against the workbench, his eyes shimmering in the subdued glow. "You came," he said, his voice low, almost surprised, and it shattered something within me, the final remnant of defiance I'd been holding on to. I felt the urge to express that we needed to halt, that this was not right, yet as he moved nearer, his hand lightly grazing my cheek, the words vanished. His touch sparked something within me, and I surrendered to it, my determination disintegrating like dust. Initially, there were no words exchanged between us. His lips met mine with a fervent intensity, his hand slipping beneath my sweater, radiating warmth against my skin. I returned his kiss, my fingers weaving through his hair, the universe shrinking to the warmth of his body, the excitement of his desire. The garage door stood closed, the house enveloped in slumber, yet the danger lingered, David above, Jake just a few steps away, the existence I had crafted teetering on the edge. And yet, that peril only ignited our passion, our breaths intertwining, our hands clumsily exploring, capturing fleeting moments that seemed destined to blaze eternally. "You're everything," he murmured against my neck, his voice thick with emotion, and my heart ached, suspended between the thrill of his declaration and the gravity of our actions. Yet, secrets possess an uncanny ability to emerge from the shadows. A floorboard creaked overhead, abrupt and piercing, and we halted, my heart pounding fiercely against my ribs. Footsteps, measured and intentional, echoed down the staircase. I pushed Ethan toward the side door, my voice a frantic whisper. "Go now." He paused, his eyes filled with uncertainty, yet he slipped out just as the garage door groaned open. Jake stood there, his face ashen, his gaze sharpening as it fell on me, solitary yet tousled, my sweater askew, my breath unsteady. "What brings you out here?" he inquired, his tone strained, filled with doubt. I stumbled over my words, mumbling something about inspecting the car, yet his eyes remained fixed on me, piercing and probing, as if he could read the truth etched into my very being. I trailed behind him into the room, my legs trembling, hoping he hadn't caught sight of Ethan, hadn't overheard us. Yet Jake's silence weighed heavily, his glances icy, and I sensed that something had changed. The following morning he hardly uttered a word to me, forcefully placing his cereal bowl down before departing in silence. David observed and inquired about my distress, but I dismissed it, feeling a tumult in my stomach. Ethan's silence was palpable. He neither reached out nor appeared, leaving his absence to be a bittersweet mix of relief and anguish. I attempted to maintain a facade of normalcy, preparing dinner and smiling at David's anecdotes, yet each passing moment felt disingenuous, the hidden truth gnawing at me like an unhealed scar. Just 48 hours later, everything fell apart. In the backyard, I was diligently pulling weeds when Jake approached me, his expression a tempest of anger and pain. "I saw him," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper, quivering with emotion. "Ethan, slipping quietly out of the garage under the cover of darkness that night." "I'm not foolish." My heart froze, the breath vanished from my lungs. I started to protest, but Jake interrupted, his words slicing through the air. "You're meant to be my mother, not whatever this situation is. How could you treat Dad this way?" From my perspective, his voice trembled, and the anguish in his gaze surpassed any accusation. I reached for him, tears cascading down my cheeks, but he withdrew, marching away, leaving me solitary with the burden of my treachery. I understood that it was time to bring it to a close, to confront the chaos I had created. That night, I sent a message to Ethan, informing him that we were finished, that it had come to an end. He offered no argument, made no pleas, simply replied with a solitary word, "Okay." Yet the silence that ensued was overwhelming. The following day, I revealed everything to David, my voice trembling with each confession, bracing myself for his fury, for him to walk away. Instead, he remained still, his expression folding into a sorrow that pierced more profoundly than rage. "I trusted you," he said, and those words shattered my heart. We conversed for what felt like an eternity, the exchange filled with raw emotion and pain. While he remained, something within us broke, a trust that now seemed uncertain to restore. For weeks, Jake hardly uttered a word to me, his pain lingering like a persistent ache in my heart. Ethan ceased his visits, slipping away from our lives like a specter, and I learned he had moved on to another college, beginning anew in a distant place. The house fell into a hush, an unsettling silence that swallowed the laughter of Jake's friends, leaving only the haunting resonance of my guilt. I immersed myself in the process of repair, conversations with David, seeking forgiveness from Jake, attempting to restore what I had shattered. But the marks lingered, evident in Jake's cautious looks, David's strained expressions. One evening, perched on the porch where everything started, I gazed at the jasmine vines, their fragrance thick in the atmosphere. I had hoped to support Ethan, to instill in him the confidence he so desperately needed, yet all my efforts resulted in fracturing the bonds with those I cherished. The excitement of those fleeting instances has diminished, revealing only the remnants of my decisions. I pursued a glimmer, believing it would illuminate my existence, yet it incinerated all I cherished. As I stepped back inside, the heaviness of that realization enveloped me, a poignant reminder that certain errors don't merely dissipate, they alter your reality, and you bear them eternally.